What's up, guys? Framinthor here, and I noticed there's like a lot of controversy happening around the JK Rowling Hogwarts Legacy stuff, and I really try to understand why they're calling JK Rowling transphobic, why you shouldn't play the game. Now, obviously, like in my opinion, a game is a game. If you don't want to play it, don't play it. If you want to play it, play it. I don't think it has anything to do with J.K. Rowling or whatever. I mean, if you thought that way, honestly, you probably shouldn't play any video game ever because there's controversies left, right, and center everywhere. So it's up to you to decide where you draw the line. So I don't really care about that aspect. Like, you do you, boom. But I was trying to understand really why people are calling J.K. Rowling transphobic. There's this pretty much 1 hour video by Jamie Dodger that I watched, which kind of explained it based on her like manifesto essay, whatever. I didn't really get it. Then there's the one that I think what people really were talking about, which is like her anti-trans tweets. And I really don't understand what's transphobic about it. I watched the video, don't necessarily agree. I think there's an overreaction. But either way, let's watch the video again. I'll give you my thoughts, why I don't think it's transphobic. And by the way, I'm not here trying really to defend J.K. Rowling. I just want to understand what people consider as transphobic. Okay? For all I care, J.K. Rowling is transphobic. I really don't care about the individual. The individual attacked cis white man, right? It's like, she's clearly pro-women and not so much, by being pro-women, she comes off as anti-man. I don't think she's actually anti-man, but she is extremely pro-women, which can come off as anti-trans as well. But again, I don't know her personally, what she believes. Tweets are not the best example of what a person thinks because it's very hard to explain your whole point and your thought process, so everything can be misconstrued. But anyways, let's watch this video, and he will explain why she's transgender, and then I will try to understand and ask questions throughout. So let's go.
This is not news, it's just something that is becoming more and more obvious. I literally had a whole other
This is, by the way, a 2-year-old video, okay, because I wasn't aware of this controversy at the time either, but this controversy kind of like popped up again because of Hogwarts Legacy, so...
Video edited, planned, ready to go out today, but I am recording this as a very last minute replacement because I feel like it is more important to talk about. I hope you don't mind. Hey Spuds, it's Jamie, what's up? I hope you're well. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and I hope you're gonna enjoy it, if that's the right thing. I hope you like it, or like my take on it. I don't know. Welcome to the video. I'm just going to dive straight in and say JK Rowling and transphobia is not something that is new to this channel, but it's always something I've taken a more neutral approach to because, to be honest, I've never been completely sure if she's truly like anti-trans or if maybe she's just been a bit misinformed and misguided in...
One thing I want to mention, I don't want to go into the whole like the minute of like, oh, she's afraid of trans. I understand what a transphobia is supposed to mean, but that's not what we're using it as, okay? She's not actually afraid of trans. She sees trans, she's like, oh my god, I'm scared. Okay, that's not... I don't want to go into those kind of like, oh, she's like, you know... That's not the goal here, okay?
Her approach to some things on trans matters. She supported Maya Forstater. This is something I've also spoken about in a video. And Maya is a lady who was being transphobic in her place of work and felt wronged for being fired for that behavior. JK Rowling has also liked anti-trans tweets in the past, but when there was backlash to this...
The Maya thing, there's rules against researcher who lost job over transgender tweets. I don't remember the exact thing, however, there was a problem with how it was something like her opinion... There's like 4 categories to why her opinion should not trump someone's existence or something like that, where like her opinion can like negate someone's existence or something like that. Don't remember the exact thing, but it was literally like the 3 first criterias were okay, and then the 4th one was because it was negating someone's existence. That's why the judge ruled it right? Though I believe it could have been probably worded better and would be fine. It was a weird one, like it was a really weird one, because also like the fourth category was also like, it depends how you understand it, I guess. So yeah.
She had a representative.
Not saying Maya is or is not transgender. I don't know the person, but I'm just saying that's like, it's kind of like a trial loses on the technicality. That's kind of what that whole thing felt like. I watched a 1 hour video by this guy and his girlfriend, or wife at this point, I guess, and it felt like she lost by technicality, right? And I'm not saying that she's not transphobic, even if she won without the technicality. All I'm saying is the law is dictated in such a way there where I could see the technicality, you know?
State that she had had a, I'm quoting this, clumsy and middle-aged moment. Well, I'm pretty sure there are no excuses that can be made by or for her this time. As
another thing I believe, honestly, don't apologize unless you actually mean it. Oh, pizza is here. Give me a second. Okay. Let's continue.
Well, I'm pretty sure there are no excuses that can be made by or for her this time, as JK Rowling has directly written transphobic tweets from her account. It's not just liking, it's not just supporting somebody, literally just full-on anti-trans tweets. The cherry on this transphobic and rather turfy hat trick, as yesterday she posted these tweets. Just gonna...
So this is what I find where I do not understand why this is actually transphobic. So the problem, okay, so let me explain kind of what I think she's meaning, and that's why I don't find transphobic. I can't tell her actual intention though. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. Now, from this perspective, it just feels like she wants to defend women and women's rights, women's places, and all that stuff. When she says sex isn't real, what I am assuming she means is the whole this is where the problem is with, like, you mix sex and gender, because gender is supposedly, even though some people say sex and gender is the same thing, some people say sex and gender are different things. Sex is like the biological stuff, gender is the socially constructed stuff. Honestly, at this point, it's so confusing. I don't know what to believe. I'm an old school guy. For me, sex and gender is very similar, okay? But if you identify as something else, like if you're born in a woman's body and you identify as a man, I'm fine with it. If you're an adult, do whatever you want. I'm not, like, this has nothing to do with me. It doesn't affect me. However, regarding this tweet, because I have to kind of defend myself before people lose their shit in the comment section, okay? This tweet, if sex isn't real, again, if she's mixing sex and gender, I can understand this point, because when people say that there's a spectrum, that means that there's no one specific thing that makes you a man or a woman, because it's a spectrum, right? So you can be in between, you can be too much, you can be too less, or whatever. That's how I understand the spectrum, right? So in that case, that means that no person has the exact same sex, therefore there's no same-sex attraction, that there's no real reality for women. It's based on, she's over exaggerating the point that people are making about the spectrum. That's how I see it. Okay, I don't love trans people, but raising the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. Now, same as how trans people are saying that, how should I, like, okay, let's say it like this. Erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. Similar to how trans people say that their life is meaningful and all that stuff, and like you can't discount their experiences and all that stuff. She's basically using that same argument, worded a bit off, regarding women. Okay, again, she comes here as a defender of women's rights and women's space and all that stuff. So from that perspective, I understand what she's saying. I don't understand how this is an attack on trends. I understand how this is a defense on women. Basically, don't like when you go full on, and I'm not talking about like the regular trends. They're like I'm talking about the extremities, and I feel like that's who she's referring to, the extremists, and we all know them. Don't pretend like, you know, there's like the trends that are like cool, they're chill, they don't want too much attention, they're happy with themselves, and that's fine, and they want trans rights, which is normal. They want to have the same human rights, and that's normal. And then you have crazy people who are just, it's not even so much that they would just want trans rights, they want to trample on everyone else. We all know who these people are. I'm not saying that's all the trans, but we all know who these people are, okay? And I don't think majority of the trans community is like them. So I think J.K. Rowling here, and again, this is, you know, I'm coming here in good faith. I trying to be to both sides. And in my opinion, she's referring to the extremes, the extremists, who basically believe that there's no sex and all that stuff, or basically there's no actual gender, everything is a spectrum. So based on their logic, this tweet makes sense. Okay, based on the extremist logic, this tweet makes sense. Okay, people who menstruate, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out, whatever. Like the wamben, wimpend, wumud, not in very good faith there. I understand what she means. Yeah, okay, it's a woman. And again, the way I see it, sex is biological. That one, I don't think I can give up. Gender, we can discuss. Sex, in my opinion, the way I have studied sex all my life, science books, all that shit, sex is biological, okay? We can say gender is socially constructed. I'm totally fine with it. However, when you are born, usually, like, and again, are there people who are born in like an intersex? Actually, yes. How many of these people are actually exist? Very little, and I also believe they have a very low survival rate. I don't remember that one, but I feel like I read about that somewhere where people are born like literally in the wrong body. Like, I mean, not well, it's hard to say. Like, I don't want to discount the people who actually feel like they're in the wrong body. I mean, like people who are like they're XX chromosomes, but they're actually in a male body. You know what I mean? Like the chromosomes and the body did not match scientifically, not anything else, just scientifically. All right. Those people are a vast minority. I believe those people have a lower survival rate as well. And based on what she's saying, by biology, people who menstruate are women. Now, you can transition to a man, don't do the operation, you know, like still have your ovaries and all that stuff, and you can still menstruate. I mean, sex-wise, I still think you're a woman, but if you want to identify as a man, want to be called a man, I'm totally fine with it. I don't care. Like, it's not my business. So, again, that's like full-on J.K. Rowling in good faith, and what she means comes off really fucking bad, but I don't see it as transphobic. Anyways, let's see how he explains it.
I'll leave them there for a minute, let you maybe read them. You could pause the video if you wanted to read them fully. They'll be back later, don't worry. It's like she'd initially been testing the waters with her anti-transness, like a kid pressing the buttons to see how far they could go before they got in trouble. But no, not anymore. She's just gone full out this time. No holding back. Like,
also, by the way, in none of these tweets, she doesn't trample on trans rights. Maybe on their emotions, but not on their rights. There's nothing in here that says that they don't deserve the same healthcare, the same human rights, and all that stuff, and human dignity. That's not that. I really don't get that from her tweets. At most, she's defending women, and maybe she's defending it by, to an extent, attacking the trans community. But I believe the only part of the trans community she attacks is the extremes.
Know her views. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of protesting for Black Lives Matter. And it honestly hurts.
Ooh, BLM. How did that turn out? Feel bad for the black communities because they're the ones who really suffer from BLM.
Hurts my soul to see that despite all of this existing crap that we have going on in the world at the minute.
Now, I don't like this argument. It's the same as saying it's like, oh, this person is like, is the same as like when Steven Crowder is always complaining about 50 million while people can't afford eggs and bacon. Not a genuine argument. I don't like this argument. This is a very similar where it's like, oh, she's complaining about these rights while there are other issues in the world. It's like, okay, bro, like, I mean, there are always going to be other issues in the world. Like, it's not like you're only going to complain about the top hot issue at the moment, right? It's like, oh, there's a war in Ukraine that can lead to World War II. Well, I guess we can stop arguing about women's rights and trans rights, you know, like, and fuck racism. It's like, no, like these are still issues that are worth talking about, even if there's a bigger issue at hand. I don't like this argument.
This is what she decided to use her platform for, this being transphobia. I wanted to talk to you about why what she tweeted recently was transphobic and why it's so hurtful to the trans
Also, by the way, BLM has nothing to do with the UK for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there were protests in the UK for BLM. I don't know this for sure, but probably there were protests in Canada. But does it really have to do with the UK? Not really. I mean, to an extent, yeah, because it was like British settlements, but you know what I mean. It's like with the UK currently, it doesn't really have anything to do with it.
The partners of trans people, friends, family, supporters of the trans community, why it is just hurtful to transness in general. So her first tweet read, and I'm gonna read this so I get it right word for word. If sex isn't real, there is no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. Firstly, no one is trying to say that sex isn't real. In my opinion, this is just a very weak thing said by anti-
Yes, there are people who try to say sex isn't real. Yes, there are. And I feel like she refers to those people. And I think that's where like the main misconception happens. There are people who say sex isn't real. There are people who just put everything, sex and gender is the same thing, put everything on the spectrum. Okay, there are those people. I don't think they're a majority. I don't think they're, you know, their opinion counts for too much when like they discount biology completely. However, there are those people, so that's not a really fair argument. Okay, I would say majority of trans don't believe that.
Anti-trans people to make trans people seem illogical. But sex is not what defines a person's gender. And using this argument and trying to say,
but she didn't speak about gender. And that's the whole point. She didn't really speak about gender, unless she mistook sex and gender.
That sex is the be-all and end-all and sex is the same as gender is very outdated. Some people might see me, a trans man, and say that due to the likelihood that my chromosomes are XX, not what I know or anybody else knows, that my sex is female. I'm just going to go through some points quickly about why
that's usually what it means, yes.
This rhetoric is transphobic and quite frankly flawed.
Okay, so that rhetoric, in my opinion, is not transphobic. There's no hate to a trans person to say their sex at birth is, you know, female or male. That, to best of our knowledge, that's what it is. Later on, when your mind develops and you feel like you're in the wrong body, when you're an adult, hopefully, you can make the decision if you want to transition. The reason I'm saying adult, because I really don't think kids are in the best state of mind to make this decision, because this is the decision that would affect the rest of their lives, and they legit can be just in a phase, confused, right? It's like, I mean, and again, don't get me wrong, if kids are actually trans, almost nothing is holding them back from becoming later on. To say that's like, well, they have a high rate of suicide. I'm sorry, they have a high rate of suicide even after transition. Okay, maybe not as much, but there's still a high rate. Okay, to say that's like, well, they're being bullied. Everyone's getting bullied as a kid. Okay, if you're weaker, the stronger person will bully you. If you're different and everyone is the same, you're gonna get bullied. That's just kids. I mean, it sucks. We should work towards a world where there are no bullies, but in the real world, you're gonna have bullies in your workplace, in society, in a club, wherever. Wherever there's gonna be competition, there are gonna be bullies. That's not something you can really avoid. That's human nature. Unless we somehow lose emotions at some point and become equilibrium, then maybe there won't be any bullies. I don't know. Okay? My point being is... Oh, fuck, I don't remember. But I think I made my point clear about this. Yeah.
Chromosomes aren't always XX and XY, and they don't always match up with the typical biological sex that you...
Now, he is right. There are actual intersex cases. How do you call it? The outlier is not the rule. You never use an outlier as the rule. The chance of this happening are extremely slim. Okay? So, just because there is a case doesn't mean that this is for the rule, okay? There are some people who are born with 9 fingers. Well, it's normal to have 10 fingers, okay? When you think of a person, you think he has 10 fingers, not 9 fingers, okay? Well, but there are some people who have 9 fingers, you're discounting their experience. No, we're just going to use the rule as the rule and the outliers as the outliers, okay? Because, like, they do not affect the average. So, technically, yes, you're correct. However, it's a very, 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 very rare case for that to actually happen. Sex-wise, biology, okay?
would expect them to, or that many people would expect them to. Intersex people are a very real thing. Records of legal sex can be changed, just like records of gender identity. My legal sex is male, my birth certificate says male, and that's important. And why the hell does it matter? Trans men and trans women are not trying to say, look at me,
I don't like this argument too much of like, you can legally change your sex. I mean, yeah, okay. You can also legally be a fucking, what do you call it? A serial killer and not be in jail on a technicality. You can be a mass rapist and not be in jail on technicality. Bill Cosby. Okay, so using the whole legality, you can change your sex. Okay, great. When you are born, though, you don't have that legal right. You're a child, okay? You're gonna be whatever the doctor says you are. Later on, you can change it. Wow, great. That doesn't really change the point, like what she said. Okay, like I don't feel like that's an offense to trans people as a whole.
I'm cisgender. We're not trying to hide our journeys. We just want to live our lives as the gender we know we are. So transphobes...
I agree with this one. And again, if you're like an adult, do whatever the fuck you want. This should not affect anyone. The problem comes to play when people of a certain demographic try to take the rights away from other people, when there's an uneven playing field, because people want their rights to trump over others, okay? For example, and again, trans can do whatever the fuck they want, has nothing to do with me, and shouldn't have, but the other thing is, they also should not affect me. I should not be able to affect trans people, okay? My rights do not trump theirs, but their rights should not be trumping mine or a woman's. Now, in what way do trans rights trump over women? Okay, or trans people can trump over women in a sense. Trans athletes is probably the easiest example. I think every person who is logical enough can easily see that a man who was an athlete who transitioned into a woman is going to be beating a lot of women easily. Okay, I don't think this is rocket science. If Shaquille O'Neal came out, like I think this was this Chappelle or was it I think it was Chappelle. Could have been yeah, I believe it was Chappelle. But anyways, he said like if Shaq, I think he said Shaq, want to become a woman, right, and play in the WNBA, do you think he would ever lose? How many points do you think he'll score in a game? Probably like 200. Okay, it's not a fair competition. However, that being said, trans people should have their own fucking category in sports. I feel like, yeah, if there's a demand, give them the fucking space. Totally fine with it. There's demand for space washrooms, give them the space. Okay? I'm not against them having spaces. However, their spaces should not take away from other people's spaces. You have NBA and you have WNBA. The WNBA does not impede on the NBA, nor does the NBA impede on the WNBA. Okay, so that's my point. And someone like J.K. Rowling, who pretty much is a feminist, comes out to defend women's rights and women's spaces, has every right to defend those spaces, because a lot of times, and we see it more and more today, that trans spaces are trumping, and the only ones who are losing here, by the way, are women. Men don't really care, in a sense, like this doesn't really affect men, that women are losing their spaces to trans people. Doesn't affect men. The only losers here are women. So you can't really blame a person for defending women.
Splitting hairs on this outdated and exclusive terminology is quite frankly getting very boring. As I said, no one is trying to say that sex isn't real, but making sex the be-all and end-all of experiences and who people are erases the lives and experiences.
And okay, here's why another point, like why his argument is kind of bad. If you say, okay, so sex is real, but you can change it all nilly-willy because you can legally change it, then sex doesn't mean anything. Therefore, you take away from the reality of sex. That's pretty much the logical, like, you know, train of thought, right? It's like, it's not that it's not real, it means that sex is meaningless. Does that make sense?
Of trans people, and that is invalidating. Another thing J.K. Rowling mentioned is same-sex attraction.
And again, this whole invalidating trans people, but you understand that by invalidating the importance of sex, you're also invalidating women because you're invalidating their sex. It's not that you're like saying that women are not real or whatever, or sex is not real, but you're invalidating the importance of sex, right? Because then, if sex is not important, then women experiences all by extension are also not important, because, well, what is a woman, right? And oh man, now that is a movie to watch. Okay.
Sex attraction is a term used by many. Exclusive terminology is quite frankly getting very boring. As I said, no one is trying to say that sex isn't real, but making sex the be-all and end-all of experiences and who people are erases the lives and experiences of trans people, and that is invalidating. Another thing J.K. Rowling mentioned is same-sex attraction, and same-sex attraction is a term used by many anti-trans people as another way to invalidate trans people. It's a term used to describe me, a trans man who's in a relationship with a cis woman, as a lesbian couple. Me and my soon-to-be wife Shaba are clearly not in a lesbian relationship, as I am a man, and to say that we are or imply that we are is insulting to me as a trans person, Shaba as a partner of a trans person, and also quite frankly to lesbians.
Okay, I understand how he can get offended by it, okay? But take this for example. If sex is not important, there's a gay couple, and then one day one of the men in this relationship, he's like, I feel like I'm a woman, right? He identifies as a woman, he goes to his transition, and to say that this gay couple just became a straight couple also invalidates them as gay. Wouldn't you agree? Right? So there's a lot of issues with the terminologies here. That's why I don't think she's transphobic, because it's a terminology thing. Right? You can view it in the way that's like, well, it's, you know, it's offensive to trans, and like it discounts their experience, stuff like that. But you can also see how what the argument you're making is discounting gay experiences when one of the people in the relationship decides that he's a woman. Are they now straight? No, you don't just, you know, and if they are, then you're invalidating the experience of gay people, right? There's this whole, it goes in a circle. There's a massive problem with all of this, okay? So it's a person-to-person basis, and I don't think she said anything that is extremely wrong, and I don't think you are wrong in the sense that of how you explain it. I think you're both right, depends on the circumstances.
Because again, I am a man. Transphobes try to use sexual attraction based on sex and not gender as a way to justify their discrimination, and to label trans men as women and trans women as men. It's so old. Grow up, move on. It's not right. We really don't need to erase the gender of trans people in this way. And you know what? There is far more to people and gender and attraction than the
You see, he keeps referring to gender. We don't know that she meant gender. We know she said sex. So again, so now you are mixing up gender and sex, and this is why this whole thing is confusing. Can you decide if we're talking about sex or gender? Are they the same? Are they separate? Please, you know? Because like you can't keep referring to gender when she said sex, unless they're the same thing, unless you think she meant sex. She meant gender when she said sex. So it's like you have to make this decision, okay? Because like otherwise, why are there two words? Why is there a sex and why is there a gender? And just make it sex or gender. Like there's no need for the second word. It means the same thing, right? Like this is where it gets really confusing. Like he's complaining about gender, she's complaining about sex. Like
genitals you were born with and the chromosomes that you cannot see. I don't know about you, but I've never seen somebody and gone, ooh, that's a beautiful set of chromosomes you've got there.
okay, like that's a very weak argument about the chromosomes. Okay, like we know enough about DNA to understand what X, Y, and XX is. Like there's no need to be patronizing about that, okay?
The alternative and correct way forward is to base attraction on gender. It's an inclusive term that does not mean you have to find trans people.
First of all, I don't think there should be any attraction based on gender. I feel like if you're attracted to a person, you're attracted to a person. I don't give a shit if you are attracted to a man, sometimes you're attracted to a woman, sometimes you're just attracted to something else, like yourself, not objects or animals, okay? Like none of that shit. However, I don't care, and no one should care who someone is attracted to. It's like, it's such a non-issue.
Attractive. It just recognizes that genitals and chromosomes are not the only important things when it comes to attraction, because it recognizes the role that gender plays and accommodates trans people and our validity. Secondly, all the trans people I know, and I would bet you all the money in Gringotts that I know more trans people than JK Rowling, all the trans people I know definitely do not love her. And there's a big old but in her tweet that
she never said that trans people love her though. She said she loves trans people.
That we really need to talk about. JK Rowling says, I love trans people, but... And we all know what follows a but, don't we? She's clearly just throwing that in there to keep a tiny little fingernail grip on the see-through veil of her not being anti-trans. You can't...
I love human beings, but if a human being enters my home without permission, threatens my life, I will kill him. But...
love trans people and then invalidate and shit on them to your 14 million followers in the same tweet. That's like saying I love biscuits, but biscuits don't exist and biscuits aren't really food and they don't deserve to be recognized as food. I'm sorry, what? The next thing she tweeted...
bad example, because some people consider biscuits as poison. So... it's like, oh, what's the difference between poison and food? It's like...
truly baffled me. And this one was a sharing of an article about COVID and menstruation, and what JK Rowling had to say about this one was the following. People who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Womban? Wimpand? Woomud? Woomud. If you don't get it, JK Rowling is trying to be
that's the one that got you, Woomud?
highly patronizing by pretending to have forgotten the word woman.
Yes, I agree on that one. Like, again, those three words, it's like, that was very patronizing. Yes, sure. Okay. But again, she might be very agitated by trans people stomping all over women rights and spaces. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
When reading an article that uses the word people. Well, I am not a womban, wimpud, woomud, or even a woman. And I used to menstruate. So yes,
notice the wording. I used to menstruate. When? When your body was that of a woman's?
JK, people who menstruate is the right term to use. Some women menstruate, some don't. Some men menstruate, some don't. And some non-binary people menstruate, and some don't. But having a title like men, women, and non-binary people who menstruate is a little bit long-winded, which is why it's easier to just shorten it down to people who menstruate. Because it is not just women. I'd like to also point out that this is a brilliant example of being so blinded and blinkered of dislike towards a group in society that you...
That's not a dislike. That's not dislike towards a group. That's that's liking her own group more. It's not a, doesn't mean that the dislike. It's like a man standing by men's rights, defending men's rights, because while women's rights need more help. Okay, but he would still prefer to choose men's rights as something to like support. That's like, she's not trampling on any. Again, this is where I'm confused. Like, this doesn't feel a very offensive thing, right? I can't relate directly, but like logically speaking, I'm a very logical person. This doesn't feel very offensive. I get it. Trans people have gone through a lot of shit in their life with like society not accepting them, people making fun of them. I get it. This feels like an over exaggeration to almost nothing, because she clearly here is talking about women. Just because the scapegoat in this instance is trans doesn't mean that she's here to offend trans. That's why, I understand the arguments like, I love trans, but I love women more. And that's her whole fucking point, okay? I don't think she's advocating for less trans rights. I don't think she hates trans. I think she wants women to not lose their spaces and their rights. That's literally what it comes off as. And sometimes her, like, the defense of one category can be very offensive to others, right? It's like, oh, he's trying to defend his own people, meanwhile our people are suffering. Well, shit, yeah, okay, he's trying to defend his own people. That's pretty much what this is, right?
You're shooting yourself in the foot. By J.K. Rowling fighting to bond the terms menstruation and women together so strongly, it's actually excluding not just trans women, but also a lot of cis women as well. What about older cis women who have gone through menopause so no longer menstruate?
This is such a weak argument. What about older women who identify as women who no longer menstruate? I'm pretty sure they don't identify themselves just based on menstruation. Okay, like, this is such a weird argument.
What about people with PCOS, or who've had experiences like cancer and have had a hysterectomy, or don't menstruate for whatever?
Again, this doesn't... The outlier does not negate the rule. It's an outlier. What about that one person out of 10 billion who is born with a deformity where he doesn't have a penis, he doesn't have a vagina, and he has to piss out of his ass? What about this person? I'm sorry, he is an outlier. Fuck, man.
Reason. Honestly, J.K. Rowling,
this is why I don't like these arguments, because like, what examples are you really bringing? It's like the super odd example of somebody has a cancer so they don't have menstruation. Like, really, how often does that even happen?
You're a world-selling author and you can't even see the plot holes in your own tweet. By being so rigid in her views and erasing the experiences and the identities of trans people, J.K. Rowling is also erasing the experiences of some cisgender women and intersex people. Sex is not binary.
Not really. If you wanna go by that example, I can easily say that some trans ideologies or trans thoughts, depends on like where they line up on their ideologies, are negating other trans rights. I can say that some men are negating other men rights. I can say some women are negating other women rights, because the rule doesn't apply. Like, you cannot have a rule that applies to everyone, right? Like, you can't have, like, there's like the general consensus, and then there are outliers. I think I dug through this point too much.
And we can't keep pretending like it is, and using that falseness as a way to invalidate trans people and intersex people. Finally,
and I doubt she invalidates trans people on any real level here. I understand how you can be offended by this, but I don't see anything in this that invalidates trans people, that she's against trans, that she hates trans, that she's, I guess at this point, transphobic. I really don't see it. I see her as someone who champions women's rights and women's spaces. That's really like all I can see from these tweets, and that's mostly what I could see from that manifesto essay that she wrote, that these guys, him and his wife at this point, I guess, made a video on.
by claiming that more inclusive language and the progression of trans rights and acceptance will detract from other rights is the biggest pile of bull. The biggest.
No, it's not. Let's hear it again.
And using that falseness as a way to invalidate trans people and intersex people. Finally, by claiming that more inclusive language and the progression of trans rights and acceptance will detract from other rights is the biggest pile of bull.
No, it actually isn't. And we can just use women's spaces in sports, women's sports spaces as the best example. And if you want to say it's like, well, trans woman is the same, like, you know, like trans is just an adjective. Trans woman is the same as like saying a blonde woman, whatever. They all fit under the woman umbrella. And you put all of them in the same umbrella in sports. I'm sorry, you are fucking over all the women. Straight up. And that is what I feel like women like J.K. Rowling are defending. They do not want their own women's spaces to be affected by other people. Trans or men. The whole feminist movement was because men were impeding on women's spaces. Now what's happening is trans rights are impeding on women's spaces, and I feel like it's totally fine to defend women's spaces. Build your own, like have your own space. I know it's not easy, but that's how it starts. Okay, you'll have your own spaces, you'll have your own sports events, you'll have your own shit. Okay, it will just take time for society to adapt. And I feel like that's okay. Not like Rome wasn't built in a day. Okay, it takes time, but you don't build Rome on top of Greece. Okay.
The biggest. Equal rights for trans people does not mean less rights for women or
yes, it does.
Cisgender people or anybody else for that matter. It's not pie. There's not a limited amount.
Not okay. So let me correct that. It shouldn't. Equal rights for trans people shouldn't affect rights for any other group. I agree to that. It shouldn't. But until that is the case, you can't hate on people defending their own spaces.
Of slices. It's not tug of war. Everyone can have rights, so just stop being such a twat. Rowling created one of the most loved series ever. Maybe even the most loved series ever. Sure. It was a world that was an escape for many, including many within the LGBT+ community. The whole narrative of the series focused on a war where assholes discriminated against Muggle-borns because of what? Factors they can't control? Who they're born as? Does that sound familiar? The baddies lost and the heroes won for a reason. For the creation.
I mean, it's a generic plot line that every fucking, like, you'll have it in everywhere. Like, you can attribute this to pretty much any book ever written by racists, by misogynists, by sexists, by by transphobes. Pretty much it's like, it's a regular plot line to like almost any book. Final Fantasy 14 story, like up until basically up until Shadowbringers not included, is literally about that. Like, I mean, it's not a strong argument. So you can't see the connection. Like, yeah, you can see a connection wherever you want to see a connection. Like, it's not.
Creator of this world to basically turn around and use her enormous and enormously influential platform to basically shit on the minorities that looked up to her and her.
I don't think she's shitting on anyone. I think she's defending women rights. But again, I covered that point.
Creations is just so horrible to see. Now more than ever, it's to remember that support is out there and we can separate the creation from the creator. Trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are valid. Check out the link in my bio to see how you can help and support black trans people, and let's all just try and stop shitting on each other, okay?
But here's the thing. Here's like, when you say trans women are women, you said trans men are men, I understand what you're saying, but they're so like, okay, so first look at this. Most men's experiences are very, very similar as they grow up until they're basically like their 20s. Most men's, you can put them in a category of loser and winner, right? That's usually most men, and this is pretty much true everywhere. Okay, there you have weaker men, you have stronger men, you have smarter, you have super, you have the guys who get all the girls and the guys who are virgins till they're like 25. Okay. I don't think these experiences are what most trans people who are, let's say, born in a woman's body want to become a man, right? Most trans men do not go through these experiences. They have bigger shit in their head going on, right? They have bigger fucking problems. So, are you discounting now all of men's experiences to say that they're all the same? You see where the problem is with this whole thing? Because now if a man comes out, it's like, well, all men have the same experiences. Well, now you're discounting trans experiences. There's no winning with this argument. You can't, like, that's why it's technically a different genre. You can be like, well, a trans guy is a guy. Okay, sure. But you're not in the sense of, like, your fucking experiences are very, very different. Up until, like, you transitioned, you were, like, completely different. Okay, I don't think this argument is a very like controversial or a point of contention. Experiences of trans people are very different to experiences of men. And now you can say it's like, well, we are trying to live in a world where these experiences are the same. It's not gonna happen. Because kids, no matter how much you're gonna educate them, no matter how much you're gonna talk to them, unless you punish them by death, basically to make them fear for their lives, will be bullies. And if a woman feels like a guy and she's hanging out with all the dudes, let's say, right? Like we used to call these girls tomboys, right? She would be treated differently than girls who are girly girls, you know, like the, you know, all perky and smiley and like wear pink and dresses and all that shit, versus a girl who's dressing jeans and wears a cap and all that shit, right? Gonna be treated differently, right? Especially if this person is then also trans. It's like, oh, everyone always treat me like the guys. No, you don't know what the guys have been treating each other. Because most guys are not gonna beat up a tomboy chick. But they will beat up their friends because they'll have a stupid argument about like a skateboard or some shit. But they won't have this fight with a girl. So you can't say that her experience is gonna be the same as a guy experiences growing up. So now when you're saying that all trans guys are the same as guys, you are reducing the experiences men have. I'm not giving you like big experiences or whatever. It's like, oh, well, these experiences are like negligible, whatever. Yeah, sure, they are. They're not big experiences, but they do mold a man eventually. But these are not experiences that a trans guy who used to be a girl up until a certain age and then transitioned, these are not the same experiences. And usually the trans person has much more tragic experiences. So I think it's also disenfranchises the trans person's experience to say he has the same experiences as a guy. It's completely different fucking categories, okay? So that's why, like, I don't agree with most of the arguments, because it's like you only view it from the trans perspective, right? Of like, a lot of times, victimhood, we had a hard time and all that stuff. Given that you had a hard time, I understand, I can only sympathize, but most people also can't really relate. They can be like, oh man, yeah, that sucks. Like, you had a shitty life. Like, I get it, but like, here you are, you made it past a certain age, you're feeling good for you, you know, it's like, we're happy for you, but there's still not gonna be a guy in that regard, you know. It's like, most guys are not gonna treat you as a bro, as a guy. Like, some will, most people won't, and it's not due to educations, because you went through completely like a fucking shitstorm that most people, most guys cannot relate with. Okay? That's how it is.
So yeah, that is everything for today, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this matter. I hope you don't mind me having like a little bit of a rant in the last minute.
That's the outro. Okay, so yeah, so that's my video. Again, if someone can explain the comments better than like why she's actually a transphobe, these tweets, in my opinion, are really not transphobic. They come off to me as someone who's defending women rather than attacking trans. Okay? She's defending women and it feels like it's attacking trans, or like she's defending women by attacking trans. Maybe you can say that. But in my opinion, her main goal is to defend women. And again, honestly, dude, not gonna lie, for the last 5 years, from what I've seen from JK Rowling about like what she thinks about men, I didn't really like her. Okay? But I understand her point. I understand her point of view. I don't think she actually hates men. I think she hates a certain category of men. I don't think she loves all women. I think she loves a certain category of women, right? You know, and I don't think she hates trans. I think she's making fun of some trans statements that are overly extreme. And also, she's making fun of the fact that people are mixing up sex and gender, that there are two different things. Even here, Jamie Dodger was kind of talking a lot about gender while she only referred to sex, right? So, again, it's a very confusing topic. I do not see why she's transphobic. I do not see why people are losing their shit over this. I know this was blown out of proportion because someone called transphobic. Everyone just like went on the hype wave and it kind of ended there. You know how Twitter is. But from what I understand, I looked at a lot of her previous tweets. I look at this whole essay here, this one.
And group it on.
I looked at all of this. I read her essay, manifesto, whatever. I don't see it. Like, almost all of it comes off as defending women's spaces and women's rights and not as an attack on trans. That's it. And I don't see at any point that she's trying to reduce trans rights. The only time it feels like it is when she's reducing trans rights so they don't impede on women's rights. That's about it, right? It's like, well, we can't let the trans right grow because it pushes on the woman's right. She has to pick a side. She's gonna pick the woman's side because she's a feminist, right? And yeah, so anyways, that's the video. Let me know in the comments below if I'm transphobic, because I don't understand why she's transphobic. Okay? Yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Take care.